conversational series where we invite young Singaporeans from different religions and walks of life to share about a book where they have found something in it that resonates with their values that have contributed to building Singapore, the multicultural and multi-religious nation that she is today. I'm Muhammad Ashraf bin Yusof Subri, your humble executive from Harmony Center, and I will be your host for this episode. So everyone, here we have three charming guests but full of experience. We have Ustaz Ashraf Anwar, Ustazah Lina Sakina, and Mr. Don Basil. So can I have the honor to ask you to introduce your kind selves, please? Can we start with Ustaz Ashraf Anwar? The stage is yours.
Thank you, Ashraf. It's kind of weird to say the same name. I'm Ustaz Ashraf Anwar. Today I'm representing the Interreligious Organization of Singapore. On a day-to-day basis, I work as a program manager at onepeople.sg. But on the voluntary basis, I'm also as a board member at the An-Nahda Mosque. My interfaith engagement, well, this is a bit embarrassing sitting beside a Christian individual. I was studying in Egypt when I was walking just across St. Anglican Church. And then I was seeing a group of Muslim women with the full hijab, African Muslim women. They were rushing towards the church. And then, as a young undergraduate of Al-Azhar, I was like, what on earth are they doing? Are they trying to, basically convert this fellow Muslim woman? So I followed them. I followed inside the church, and that was my first ever experience inside an Anglican church. And it was basically humanitarian works the Anglican church are doing. And when I entered there, the humanitarian officers came towards me and said that, where have you been? We need Muslim representative, Muslim assistant. There was no such thing as conversion. It was purely, sincerely, just humanitarian efforts and philanthropy efforts. And from that on, I volunteered with the Anglican church in Egypt. So that was ever my interfaith experience, which it started something negative. And I can all say that it ended very positive. And up till today, we still keep in contact. And I think last year, we visited in Egypt and we managed to see the church. Yeah, so that's my interfaith engagement.
Wow, thank you so much, Ustaz Ashraf. It's amazing to know that your roots have led you to blooming to where you are today. So we must always appreciate and treasure what we have from where we came from. Thank you so much. So next, we have with us the charming Ustazah Lina Sakina. The floor is yours.
Hi everyone, Assalamualaikum. My name is Ustazah Lina. I am a full-time housewife. I am also a part-time religious teacher. I teach in a local mosque. I teach children and youth. And I am also a student. Just started continuing my studies. My engagement with interfaith started off when I did my undergraduate in comparative religion and history. I did that in IIUM in Malaysia. When I finished, I came back to Singapore and I thought to myself, I want to benefit from the knowledge that I have already attained. And I want to do that because it is my passion to actually connect with people. And so I try my best to find ways to actually apply what I've learned into practice. So I found Harmony Center, and I've been a docent with them since 2016.
Oh, thank you so much, Ustazah. It's again enlightening to know that you are still connected with the youths in your part-time work. So maybe that's where you can share more about your interfaith engagement with the young ones. Thank you so much. Okay, finally, we have Mr. Don Basil. Basil, the floor is yours. Please introduce yourself.
Hi everyone. My name is Basil. I run a social enterprise that's focusing on community building work with an interreligious lens. That's called If Then How. And my day-to-day work is a lot of interreligious dialogue and sometimes a bit of interracial dialogue and diversity as well. But I'm also here representing the Interreligious Organization of Singapore. I'm one of the youth wing members. So I'm here representing the Christian aspect of the IRO. Let's see, since Ashraf had a very nice long story about his introduction to interfaith, I'm thinking about mine and I just remembered. So I think around my ancestry is basically from Sri Lanka. So my grandfather had come down from Sri Lanka and my grandma was also Sri Lankan and a very good cook. Down the lane from us was like this Buddhist temple / spirituality center or retreat center. And my grandma right? Because those Buddhist monks came from Sri Lanka, right? So my grandma, being a very good Sri Lankan cook, knew that these monks missed their food and started to cook these food for them every single day. And as a 4 or 5-year-old little boy, I used to cycle down to the Buddhist temple and pass them this food. And the monks seemed to love it. And, at that age, 5 years old, you got no friends. So the monks became my good friends. Now, I'm from a very traditionally Catholic family, right? So we are all Christians. But when my grandmother had passed away when I was about 12 years old, so around primary 6, we had the wake, right, in the house. And this one night during the wake, they said that the Buddhist monks are coming down. The Buddhist monks are coming down to visit, right? So I was quite excited because I hadn't seen these 3 Buddhist monks at that temple for quite a few years now because my family had moved out. But when they arrived, it wasn't just 3 Buddhist monks. It was like 4, 5, 6, and then there were like 30 Buddhist monks, right? Walking in single file, right? In the dark of the night in their bright orange saffron robes. And they stopped outside my grandma's house. And they asked for permission to come in to pay their respects to my deceased grandma, right? So my uncles and aunties and my dad went up to the gate to, listen to them and give them permission, and they came in. So imagine that as a, now not so little anymore, but a 12-year-old young boy, I go into the hall where my grandma's coffin is, and now there are like 30 Buddhist monks, right? Sitting in front of a Catholic crucifix and chanting their Buddhist prayers. So you can just imagine the effect that that had on me as a young boy, watching these Buddhist monks sort of give their respects for my grandma and wishing her well for maybe out of gratitude for what she had cooked for them. And it created an impression in me, a lasting impression that this harmony between religions, this interaction between religions, it's not just important, there's an actual effect in people's lives because there was an effect in my life. Yeah, so that's how I got inspired, and my very early forays into interreligious dialogue, right? Just a delivery boy carrying food.
Well, you all started at 12 years when you were 12 years. So, I started at undergraduate.
Wow, so I started in NS, so you are considered a sepuh among us, senior. So thank you so much. It's beautiful that where you came from, again, something to do with our roots, have deeply inspired us and brought us to where we are and hopefully beyond in the future. So it's an honor to have all of you here with us. So let's begin with the book sharing now. Can we call upon Ustaz Ashraf Anwar to share more about his book and his perspectives on it?
Well, I have to make a confession here. It's not easy, as a fellow Muslim representative from IIO. There's a lot of beautiful books out there, especially from the Islam. You have Ihya Ulumuddin and, Shama'il Ashraf saying, from Imam Ghazali. You have a lot. But I will choose this particular book from when I was doing my undergraduate at Al-Azhar University. Why I choose this book is after, usually as an undergraduate, you will drag yourself to memorize certain things, why did I take this degree? Why did I even take this module? But this is different, I cry after reading the book. So it really touches me up until today. Now, most of you would imagine Al-Azhar University books, it will be as thick as this. It's like, it will be very old, and all the wording would be very, very small, and this is, to be fair, we have books like this, but for the benefit of the followers, don't worry, I'm not going to share this type of book. We have another version of Al-Azhar book, which is quite simple. This is in my first year. It's called here, An Introduction to the Islamic System. Well, for a non-Muslim, you might imagine, what is this Islamic system? Is it about the caliphate? Is it about the ISIS? But on the contrary, this book itself would basically contradict with what the caliphates and the extremists would say. And I would open this particular chapter. It's about the effect of system, right? And beautiful says here that there are 2 types of tradition. You have the prophetic tradition, and you also have the divine tradition. We usually follow the prophetic tradition when the prophet loved to use his right hand. The prophet loved to say peace. The prophet loved to smile. That is the prophetic tradition. But what about the divine tradition? And it's beautiful because it says here, وَهَذِهِ الْعَنَاصِرَ ثَلَاثَ الرَّئِيسِيَّةَ التي تتكون منها الرسالة المتضمنة في قوله تعالى كنتم خير أمة أخرجت للناس تأمرون بالمعروف وتنهون عن المنكر وتؤمنون بالله. So these 3 criteria is the criteria which makes us humanity continue to exist. We understand in the Islamic history and the Quran, there are many communities before us that have been destroyed, and this is because of certain characteristics. So what makes us still exist on this earth? I remember watching a movie 2012 about the apocalypse. People have so many bright imagination of apocalypse.
Yes.
So when will that happen? We never know. But according to this book, right, it can happen if there's no three characteristic. Interesting, right? I was like, wow. I was like suddenly, opening like, what is it? If you can see all the highlight. I was like really a diligent student, right? So it says here, it's beautiful, says here, for humanity to continue to exist, there must be an individual that continue to believe in God. And it did not say here, Allah specifically, believe in the divinity. So I was impressed. And then the continuation, it says that, but what if there is no individual on earth believe in God? This is interesting. I have humanist friends, I have non-religious friends who don't follow a particular faith. This is realistic. The Sheikh was saying that if there is nobody on this earth who believe in the concept of God, the world will continue to exist. As long as it comes to the second stage, as long as there's these two characteristics, al-amru bil ma'ruf, there must be an individual who would encourage to do good. Remember, if there is no individual on this earth, do not believe in God, the humanity continue to exist. And the second one, there must be at least individual who encourage people to do good. But what if there's no individual at all encourage people to do good? So there's nobody who believe in God, nobody encourage people to do good. The last stage is an-nahyu anil munkar, meaning that there must be at least individual on this earth, on the entire earth, who would discourage people from doing bad. And the book
Ladies and gentlemen, please rise and welcome our guest of honor, Mr. Alvin Tan, Minister of State for Ministry of Culture, Community and Youth, and Ministry of Trade and Industry. Let's give him the warmest round of applause. Thank you. Mr. Alvin Tan, Minister of State for Ministry of Culture, Community and Youth, as well as Trade and Industry. President of MUIS, Haji Muhammad Alami Musa. Chief Executive MUIS, Mr. Isa Mas'ud. Mufti of Singapore, Dr. Naziruddin Muhammad Nasir. Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, and friends joining us from our live stream on YouTube. A very good afternoon to everyone. And I begin this event with greetings of peace and blessings to everyone. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Welcome to Harmony Center's Quali-tea reception and the launch of our Abdul Alim Siddiqui Memorial Lecture 2019's publication. My name is Muhammad Ashraf, the executive at Harmony Center, and I will be your MC for today. We are grateful that we can meet, albeit in a much smaller scale event due to the current pandemic. And we pray that the Almighty grants ease and that the situation improves. Since the center's establishment, Harmony Center has been hosting faith leaders, friends, and members of the community regularly. This includes catching up with Apex leaders over tea to rekindle ties and exchange developments from the respective faith groups and guests. Today, we will be witnessing the launch of the 2019 AASML publication, and we are fortunate to have the Minister of State, Mr. Alvin Tan, who was also the speaker of this publication that we are about to launch today. This, and followed by a chat session with MOS Alvin Tan on the theme of strengthening interfaith bonding through online conversations and offline relations. Thereafter, we will take the opportunity to present tokens of appreciation to our speakers and contributors of our new series, Singapore Reads and HA TikToks. Without any further ado, may I kindly invite the Chief Executive of MOIS, Mr. Issa Masood, to give his opening remarks. CE, please.
Hey, good afternoon. Guest of honor, Mr. Alvin Tan, Minister of State for Culture, Community and Youth, as well as Trade and Industry, Haji Muhammad Alami Musa, President of MOIS, Ustaz Dr. Nazruddin Muhammad Nasir, Mufti of Singapore, distinguished interfaith leaders, friends of Harmony Center, both here with us as well as those online. Peace be upon you all, and a very good afternoon to one and all. Thank you for joining us this afternoon. I think it's been some time since we gathered physically to have a chat, have some snacks later on, as well as this afternoon we are very happy to launch the 2019 Abdul Alim Siddiq Memorial Lecture publication. I recall that when we met online during the Harmony Center's Hari Raya celebration 6 months ago in June, that was just after the circuit breaker. We just entered phase 2. We shared and discussed the adjustments our faith communities made to our religious life due to COVID-19. And today, after a long wait, we are grateful to be able to gather physically with safety measures in place, of course, to reconnect in person with each other and maintain our strong bonds of friendship. Coincidentally, our guest of honor today, MOS Alvin Tan, was also our speaker at last year's Abdul Alim Siddiqui Memorial Lecture. I'm not sure it was the foresight or great wisdom of our Harmony Center colleagues for choosing MOS Tan to be the speaker. Now, of course, he's our boss in the ministry. But I think last year we were very glad to have him speak. And of course, when he joined the ministry to champion race and religious issues, we are very glad to have him on board. So thank you, MOS Tan, for joining us today. MOS spoke about offline faith in an online world, something we appreciated as being very apt and timely, given the pervasiveness of social media. But back in 2019, none of us would have predicted that this topic itself would be even more pertinent when we entered 2020, right, with COVID further accelerating the importance of technology and virtual communities and spaces. The lecture last year discussed faith in the internet era and established that social cohesion and interfaith relations need to be nurtured and developed over time. It also touched on how the online world had the potential to be divisive if not managed correctly, but also had the potential to bring communities closer together. These ideas indeed were tested with COVID-19. The circuit breaker put a temporary halt to many of our aspects of our religious life that we were so used to. Many struggled as they were forced to adapt to new routines. Faith communities learned to leverage technology to adapt to the crisis and turn online for spiritual services and resources. But just as more people wanted to seek solace and comfort of our in times of crisis, right, our churches, our mosques, our temples were no longer as accessible as before. And after months living in the pandemic, most of us have become attuned to using applications and working and living online. However, it's also true that we are seeing more people battling technology fatigue, grappling with mental health issues and wellness issues, as they struggle to remain connected to each other during this period. Nonetheless, we are determined to gain positivity and solace in the midst of this uncertainty. We have coped with interacting with each other in virtual rooms. We have learned to take the occasional lapses of internet connectivity, lapses of audio and video in our stride. And of course, the accidental speaking without forgetting to unmute the mic, unmute the button, right, where we are doing our meetings. I think these are all things part and parcel of what we have gotten used to in meetings. We have also gotten used to the additional safe management measures that are put in place as we slowly resume our religious service and open our places of worship. Like it or not, the online face-to-face is here to stay. As we discussed at the lecture last year, the supermarket of online religious discourse allows individuals to shop for religious knowledge, but it can also be harmful. This especially when there are groups online that push ideologies, even calling for violence, for example, which will disrupt our social cohesion that we have built up over these years. It is thus fitting that today we are launching the transcript of MOS's lecture to once again remind us that as we see societies around the world becoming more polarized, there's an even more urgent need for us to come together and treasure and reinforce this religious harmony and social cohesion that we have in Singapore. Dear friends, the last time we met in June, we shared that the Harmony Centre was making adjustments to deal with the COVID-19 new normal. The way we discuss and engage in interfaith discourse also had to adapt to the restrictions on face-to-face engagements. We had to think out of the box and act quickly. Thus, the Harmony Centre experimented with a new modality, the online workshop and webinar discussion platforms available on Facebook and YouTube. Thus was born TikToks and Singapore Reads series. These two series were introduced to suit the new norms, and the Centre identified practical challenges individuals were going through during the midst of the pandemic, such as health, emotional, and spiritual support issues. Then we assembled our friends across faith communities to share resources and approaches online. As two fledgling initiatives, we received highly encouraging feedback from the participants, and we are studying how we can continue this positive collaboration across communities into a second series. What is clear is that we must never stop engaging, sharing perspectives, experiences, approaches, and building bonds of community. I would like to take this opportunity to thank the speakers and discussants of Harmony Centre's TikTok series and the contributors for Singapore Reads. Thank you for joining us today. I'm very grateful for all your support despite the trying times faced this year and the challenges faced. And I believe amid the current storms due to the pandemic, there are silver linings, and we have to take the opportunity to do the right things to benefit our communities. Dear friends, allow me to conclude. We will continue to face uncertainty in the months to come. The current generation is facing possibly the biggest challenge we ever faced. Both in lives and livelihoods are at risk. But in such difficult and challenging times, there are still opportunities, particularly to find ways to allow acts of kindness to flourish. Singapore will be defined by how we respond to this crisis, and I pray that the peaceful coexistence and the strong friendship among us, among religious groups, is something that is so precious to us and will continue to strengthen through this test. Thank you for making time to be with us here today, and hope you enjoy this afternoon session. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Siif, for your most wonderful opening remarks. Next is the highlight of today. That is the launch of our Abdul Alim Siddiqui Memorial Lecture, AASML, 2019's publication. But before that, allow me to share some recap about this series. The Abdul Alim Siddiqui Memorial Lecture program was introduced in 2011 as part of the 5th anniversary celebrations of Harmony Centre. Aside from promoting a deeper interfaith understanding, it is a platform for youth to hear and engage senior faith leaders who are invited to offer their unique perspectives and insights on contemporary, national, or global issues and trends affecting humanity. This annual lecture is targeted at the young interfaith enthusiasts, activists, and leaders from all faith communities to enable a more robust interaction and engagement amongst them on issues that are of concern to all faiths. The program seeks to nurture many more youths to be passionate in interfaith work and to champion the legacy that was established by Maulana Abdul Alim Siddiqui. The lecture will then be compiled into a book which will be released and distributed to various interfaith organizations. To date, Harmony Center has produced 9 publications from the AASML series, and it's shown here on the screen. In 2016, Harmony Center reintroduced the series with a slightly new format, which incorporates interactive presentations and breakout sessions. The new approach was also adapted to suit the current context that encourages active engagement and projection of ideas amongst the young generations. On the 5th of October 2019, MOS Elvin Tan was our guest speaker at the AASML lecture. He delivered a lecture on the theme of offline faith in an online world at the auditorium of the Singapore Islamic Hub. Before we commence with the launch of the publication, let us sit back, relax, and enjoy the video highlights of AASML 2019. Please.
Welcome to Abdul Alim Siddiq Memorial Lecture 2019, and peace be upon you. This event, or the format, is to bridge the gap between faith leaders, faith representatives, as well as the young ones. And Maulana Abdul Alim Siddiq had this vision on the importance of bringing people from the diverse backgrounds together.
We were never encouraged to be funny when we were growing up as kids in Singapore. When my brother would fall down, I would laugh out loud. My mother would say, "You think you're very funny? I throw you out the window, see whether funny or not." So this is what happens in the internet at every single minute. Next year, I guarantee you that the speed will be twice as fast and the user base will be potentially twice as fast. We must have the kind of mindset we need to know. Then we can have activities for them. The task of the religious leaders was to let the followers of each and every religion know the teachings of other religions. This is what we are doing so that the spirit of fellowship could work together. And we need to preserve this spirit of fellowship. We need to cherish this harmony and realize how precious it is. And then our friends who come before us have done, we need to strengthen it even further.
How can we invoke the same communal spirit again to start these discourses with the current generation?
Start thinking about this, start using your online platform to discuss it. This is the chance for you, to create that opportunity to echo that right message, and why do we need to have more discourse on this.
Put it on the online space. A gentle word does turn away wrong. If you see something online that is, wow, it's terrible, a gentle word in response, it does turn away. And this is the crux of counter speech.
The online world is all about being nice and portraying that doing good is a cool thing. I think that's another example of how we can try to promote positive narrative of that.
Warm round of applause, please. Indeed, that brought back a lot of memories of how our gatherings used to be. Little did we know that just within the turn of the year, things would be starkly different, but let us be united nonetheless. Now, we'd like to invite our guest of honor, MOS Elvin Tan, and our CE, Isa Masood, for the launch of the 2019 AASML publication. Right in front here, please. Everyone, I will do here by the iPad, sir. So I will do the count of 3 to 1, and MOS Elvin Tan will press play on the iPad to officiate the launch. Okay, so now 3, 2, 1. warm round of applause, please, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you, MOS Alvin Tan and CE, Mr. Isa Masood. Now, may I invite MOS Alvin Tan to please remain in front, while CE, you may kindly return to your seat. Now, ladies and gentlemen, we will be emailing everyone the link where you can access this publication, and at the same time, we will be depositing it with the National Library Board, NLB. Now it is the time for us to have a chit-chat session with MOS Alvin Tan on the topic of strengthening interfaith bonding through online conversations and offline relations. This session will be moderated by Ustazah Liana Rosli Asmara, Assistant Head of Harmony Center. Now I pass the mic to you, Ustazah, please.
Okay, so good afternoon, everyone, to our guest of honor, Mr. Alvin Tan, Minister of State for Culture, Community and Youth, as well as Trade and Industry, to our President Haji Muhammad Alami Musa, and also Chief Executive of MOIS, Mr. Isa Masood, Mufti of Singapore, Dr. Muhammad Naziruddin Muhammad Nasir, and also distinguished interfaith leaders, guests, friends of the Harmony Center, both with us here, as well as friends watching us live on YouTube. So thank you for making your time to join us. And my name is Liana, and I'm currently heading the Harmony Center of the Islamic Religious Council of Singapore. And I will attempt to make this chat session as as casual, as informal as possible. Yeah. So to MOS Alvin, it's great to be able to moderate a session with you again. I think it's been 1 year since the last session that we had during the Abdul Alim Siddiq Memorial Lecture event 2019 last year, in which you were the speaker. Yeah. So last year, just to recap, your presentation is about offline faith in an online world. And I recall in which, coincidentally, it's also something that was mentioned earlier in the video highlight. You mentioned your presentation that the internet user will continue to increase and the internet speed will be twice as fast, and we have seen this happening. And if I can put it this way, I think because of the coronavirus pandemic, the destiny of many of us are almost highly dependent in the digital platform. At least for now. Yeah. So I'm particularly interested to pick up from what we have left. And this chat session will be focusing on the theme strengthening interfaith bonding through online conversation and offline relations. Yeah. So let me ask some questions before I open it to the floor. So if I quickly begin with the question 1 for you, MOS Alvin. In your presentation last year, you spoke about the balancing of online faith and online world. And you also spoke about the importance of caring about the human soul amidst advancing and relying on algorithm and artificial intelligence to make things work for us. So based on your observation, how much has changed since since last year to this COVID year? And are there any particular areas that be of your main concern? Yeah.
Well, thank you, Liana, and I just wanted to say thank you and a very good afternoon to all our friends. Very good to see friends. I think that's the key thing, and not behind a screen. I think that's critical. So Haji Alami, also Dr. Naziruddin and Isa. It's just good to see you in person also. Thank you for gracing this occasion. And I have many, many different friends here, as I mentioned. Usually we see behind the screen. So before we start, Liana, to get into the more serious bits of the conversation, I think Isa mentioned a little bit about some of the vernacular that we've used over the past year. And you know, some of the few things that you might be quite, the few verses or phrases that you might hear online is this: we cannot hear you. Are you on mute? Can you turn on your video? Right? Yeah. Can you say that again? So that, I think, has been the lexicon of online COVID many, many times. And then after a while, you say, oh, okay, what is the password, right? What is the Zoom ID? And these, I think a year ago, these things are not usual nor common. But now you say that almost every day, right? And I think that's a big difference. But beyond that also, it's because last year, looking back, I said also that the speed of internet usage will increase, and also the speed of internet bandwidth will also increase. And so you'll see, if I were to wear my MTI hat, you'll see a lot of these different platforms like Zoom just accelerating in user growth. You see different platforms also, even the now traditional, considered traditional, like Facebook or Instagram, or even now TikTok coming up. And these platforms have seen a surge in user growth, so much so that if you look at the S&P 500, which is the stock market indices, these are quite resilient in this crisis because of user base. So what has that got to do with what we are talking about? Last year, first of all, there are two things that was quite strange for me. First is, I didn't know I'm going to be here again this year in this guise, or wearing this hat, Liana. And I just saw that both of us were just there, we're just here again in very different guises. That's one. And also the second one is, I did not know, and we could not possibly have known, that the title of last year's lecture, Offline Faith in an Online World, will be so stark and apparent this year. It's incredible. It's almost prophetic, as many of us might say. But here we are. It's really the offline faith has gone online. But last year, if we recall, there were also, I talked about two directions, offline to online, but then online to offline. So a lot of it, if you think about it, Liana, we see sermons online. This morning I was just listening to a sermon online. I know that a lot of our asatizas have also been using our Muslim.sg platform. Our Guang Ming Shan is also using, celebrating or commemorating Qingming online also. So you see the offline practices going online. That's quite critical. But then you also see online going offline. And in the midst and the crisis of the pandemic, we've seen many different examples of it, including Roses of Peace, my good friend Muhammad Irshad, and ROP, PA, Ramatan Al-Min, right? There's also put together this Buka Puasa initiative where they delivered 15,000 meals a day. It's quite incredible during Ramadan, during the height of the COVID-19 crisis. So you see that they're using digital tools to then serve people offline. So you see that on both sides. So the trend that we thought that was quite novel last year, it's now normal this year. Quite amazing. Yeah.
Thank you so much. Yeah, I think for us also, we do not anticipate that last year's topic is going to be something that we are going to talk about every now and then. But I think apart from that, perhaps some of our concern is also how, in trying to balance yourself and catch up with the new norm, to also ensure of your well-being, to balance out, the online and the offline, because we have also started to see that some people turn down some online events because they experience fatigue, for example. So how can we perhaps exercise more empathetic approach to this individual? And this is actually relate to my second question to you. So my second question is, as the economy undergoes a long, uneven recovery, it is predicted that mental health and physical well-being can be a critical issue in the longer run. So what can faith leaders do to help faith communities to continue being resilient in this unprecedented time?
Thanks, Liana. So I think the answer really lies in this room here. And so I know many of our faith leaders here are already if you are not already digital last year, like our Venerable, you would already be, within a year, if you follow his account, you know how digital he is. But if you would already have seen or have already transited towards a digital space. But coming from a digital world myself and background, frankly, I don't think it is. I think it has to be complemented by face-to-face. Ultimately, we are social creatures. Ultimately, the reason why we are following a faith is because we are not going to, it doesn't mean that we want to be plugged in digitally to something, into bytes and into bits. But we want to, and all of us adhere to a faith, we want to plug into something that is spiritual. And I think that is very, very critical. And that's something which the digital can help to serve as a conduit, but it should not be the conduit. Yeah, and because the human soul, all of our faiths are represented here, and in fact, Maulana Abdul Alim Siddiqui had even mentioned during this Victoria Memorial Hall lecture in 1949, it is about that human soul, and it's about learning one another's faith, and you can do it a little bit online, but the interaction and the service, because it's all predicated on service, cannot be done online. It can be supplemented online, but it cannot be done online. So, and we've seen so many examples of our faith leaders going out to serve, and I think that these are just good examples where we take the online, offline.
Thank you. Having said that, I'm quite curious, since we have you now here physically with us. How do you balance, yourself as as a minister who is very well known with your expertise in IT and startups? As a minister and as a father, how do you balance your engagement, with the community and online, and having more time with yourself and your family?
Yeah, thanks, Leanna, for asking that question. So it is tough, and does not mean so driving in here today. I was listening to an online sermon. So again, online, right? And I think my pastor was just saying that, ultimately, even a pastor is human, right? As a asatiza is a human, as a venerable is human, and we all have our struggles. And I think what this pandemic has shown, and particularly now looking after the youth under my MCCY and NYC portfolio, is we've seen that one of the top issues for youth in the pandemic is actually mental well-being. And that's why we've done two things in government. One is that we have the Youth Mental Wellbeing Network, which is going to be, is being stewarded by my good friend, Parliamentary Secretary Eric Chua. But then we also have a mental well-being task force also that we announced also in Parliament. And I think that because it is so critical, because of the, I would say, triple impact of the pandemic. The first is, of course, the health impact. That one is very obvious. We're all wearing masks. The second is the mental impact. I think that's very critical. And the mental impact, it can be exacerbated even digitally. Yeah, either you are digitally excluded or you are too much in the digital space that you get, embroiled in the digital space. Yeah, so these are the two critical ones that are quite critical. So there's your mental, and then the third one, of course, is economic. And so again, wearing the MTI hat and looking at ways, and Isa and I were talking about this earlier, what I'm doing at MTI, is we are almost every day trying to save, preserve our capability, our jobs, our livelihoods, trying to get companies to invest in Singapore. Yeah, so, and people are, and I've had very difficult conversations with people and businesses who've had to cope with the pandemic, ultimately close down because it's not safe to open. So the mental toil on all of these aspects matter. And for all of us, even individually, I think it's okay to seek help. I think we need to be open to that. And I think our group here is so important because in many, many different ways, we are also conduits to something that's bigger than ourselves, our faiths and our souls. Yeah, so put the long story short, I ask for help every day. And as somebody who like many of us here, is a person of faith, you just have to connect. Not digitally, but spiritually. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Minister. I think that was a very profound, a profound sharing that you shared with us. The idea of it's okay not to be okay, and it's okay to be vulnerable in these difficult times, because I think having that sense of being able to connect and extend your sense of solidarity to others is critically important. But perhaps if I can also extend a little bit, because earlier we talked about the initiative in trying to do good things and promote it online. We cannot deny there are also supermarket of fake news and sensational news that is trying to create disruptions and tensions online. And of course, apart from that, radicalization is another issue. And oftentimes, sometimes if you get overwhelmed by the tensions that happen in other countries that might also affect Singapore. So if I can ask you, the question that I have is, recently we see the attacks that took place. It's a sequel attacks in France. And apart from that, we also see how Black Lives Matters has more or less shifted the perception and create that spirit of advocacy, and the young ones tending to feel the importance of standing up for the minorities, for example. And also being the Ministry of Culture and Youth, what do you think can be that driving force for the youth to create, at least within within this point of time, in such that they can perhaps revive that gotong royong spirit that we have back then? Of course, during most of our faith leaders here be able to relate, because back then kampong moments are the best. But for now, we also have to live with it that we are in this digital space. But how can we create these opportunities? If not the same, at least something meaningful to be able to substitute with more positive voices out there. Yeah.
Thanks, Liana. So I think the key is to, and I shared this before in my previous life about digital literacy, and I think that's quite important. I give you a good example, because Liana, you raised the topic about Black Lives Matters, and I think a lot of it requires context. I give you a critical, actually a very specific example of Black Lives Matters. When I was working in the US, in the West Coast, and then this was before the George Floyd incident earlier this year. But in Black Lives Matters was already trending, hashtag Black Lives Matters. So when I was in the US, and then there was a sign in my company then, and it said somebody put hashtag Black Lives Matters. Then somebody erased it. And guess what they replaced it with? All life matters, which is quite, it's like, yeah, it's true, right? All life matters, right? True, you can't argue with that. But then there was a pushback. There was a pushback against this all life matters. But it doesn't make sense. It has to be all life matters. But then I asked around, I said, why is there such a big pushback against this hashtag all life matters? And so the reason that my American friends explained to me, whether accurate or not accurate, rightly or wrongly, is the context of the civil rights movement and the likes, is that yes, but then there's some exclusionary social norms and policies among the African American population, such that if you put all life matters, you are excluding that voice from the overall conversation. So when we adopt something which is quite unique in a different culture or societal space, we have to be quite mindful. You cannot just adopt wholesale without understanding the historical context of a country. So I learned that it was a very stark and good example. With regards to the French beheadings and all of that, I think unfortunately this has been happening, and in the online space, I know that some of the platforms have been trying to remove some of these material. We talked last year about the Christchurch attacks. So that every part of the ecosystem needs to play a part. The platforms have to be reasonable in taking down these material. Society has to eschew those material as well. Governments also have a role. But if you see hate speech online, then we can do two things. One is you report it, make sure that it is hopefully down. If it's not, then you can try to overcome hate with counter speech, which is what I shared last year. Instead of spewing hate, there is one, I think in Sydney many years ago, during the Lindt attacks, the Lindt Cafe attacks. And then I think somebody was against somebody who was wearing a burqa, a tudong then. And then somebody then said, we are not going to be racist against our Muslim friends. Because somebody had written, I'll not ride with Muslims or something along those lines. Then the youth came up with a hashtag that says, I'll ride with you. And then the hashtag grew into trending and prominence. And I think it requires that kind of attitude and kind of advocacy from youth is very, very powerful. And I think we do well when we see hate, we correct hate, and we overcome hate with love and then with counter speech. Yeah, and the youth can play a very significant part online.
Thank you so much, MOS. And in fact, it reminds me of the incident that took place in Singapore when we have the lady who complained because she has problem to see when she was watching a concert. And Sarabjit is here, the president of Young Sikh Association, took the time to explain, what is Sikhism and why they have to wear the turban. And I think that was one of a very good example where you take opportunities out of problems that could have explode and become something else, for example. So perhaps that was a good one. Thank you so much, Sarabjit, for inspiring us.
I always raise that example. So whenever I use it too often, right? Sarabjit. Yeah, good. Yeah, it was, and indeed you're right. That really is a model for us to follow, and I really commend our YSA teams for doing that. It really is a model. Yeah, so well done. Yeah.
Okay. So thank you so much, MOS Tan. Now, what I will do is I will open the question and answer session to the floor. If you have any questions, if you have, even if you don't have questions, perhaps you have some reflections or comment. Feel free to do so. I think take this time to exchange some thoughts, and I'm pretty sure everyone here, someone who was very critical and wanting to create a better social harmony status for Singapore. So if I can open the floor now, we actually have 2 mics on your sides, but if you genuinely feel that your voice can actually radiate this whole auditorium, then feel free to speak. I will try to assist in case someone else may not be able to hear from you. Yeah. So if I can have the first question or the reflections. Yes, Mufti. Yes, sure, yes, go ahead.
Good afternoon. MOS, thank you for the sharing with us your thoughts. I think the topic itself is very fascinating. I'm not sure we have enough time to discuss it. I think social media has certainly been of great help, in particular for faith communities and faith leaders. I recall that there have been many sessions where we actually managed to continue to communicate and interact with each other through social media. But I think as people of faith, I think there are concerns, in particular for the longer term. What we have seen through what seems to be an increasing dependency on social media is that sometimes it has the capability to take over even your worldview and your outlook on things. There have been, for example, criticisms that social media is not very social because it does break down social bonds because of untruth, misinformation, a lot of discrimination and so on, and racial abuse and hate speech and so on. At the same time, I think not everyone has suffered equally from the global pandemic. You mentioned the FANG stocks. And they are becoming more and more powerful. You mentioned about the stock price, and some of them, their net worth have really shot up through the roof. But what that means is they might become more powerful. We have heard, for example, criticisms of Facebook refusing to take down some post. So they decide what stays and what disappears from a post. So those are the kind of concerns, and in particular, I think the concern over deeper polarization, and a lot of echo chambers and so on, that can happen and begin to develop and fester in the social media world. So these kind of implications, I think, are very concerning to people of faith, in as much as we depend on it for continued worship and communication and connections, but the longer term consequences. So how do you think we could, or at least the world could, sort of try to mitigate these concerns over the longer term, in particular for our future generations? Something for us to think about, and I'd like to also hear your responses. Thank you.
Thank you, Mufti. It's something that has been in the discourse for many years now, starting from, I think it elevated during the 2016 US elections, I think, on misinformation. And then you've seen over the years where it has also crept into the racial and religious space also. Things like the atrocities in the Rakhine, for example, or in our neighboring countries, where incitement of the online space has led to offline attacks, right, between different faiths. I think that there requires a few things. The first is that everyone along this so-called, well, I wouldn't say an ecosystem, it's more of, I won't say a value chain, it's more of an ecosystem, has to play that part. Government has to play that part in terms of either regulation, legislation, which I think it's important, but it also have to play an equal, if not more important role in education and digital literacy. Because what you see there, and do you have the critical mind to say, okay, that is something which I don't think ought to belong here, and you then make that choice to consume. But it's very difficult, because different people are different ages. Once you go in, how do you then make sure that you know what is right or what is wrong, or what seems dubious or not? If you look at I think the US elections this round around, I think some of the companies have started to put on labels, about facts. Yeah, I think that's a big change from 2016. But I think a lot of it is also requires them to do more for us to ensure that our young, and even not so young, know how to consume and be digitally critical and digitally literate at the same time. And how do then users play their part? I think it's also the fact that you need to own your feed. In addition, what do I mean by own your feed? Is, the algorithms sometimes work in such a way where the more you, I'm looking at Mel here, but because he wears a Liverpool mask, but I get a lot of Manchester United feed. Because the more that I like Manchester United, for example, they feed more of Manchester United. I don't really see a lot of Liverpool. Maybe Mel's feed is more Liverpool, which is very unfortunate. They should take it down. Okay. So the more that you, and then that kind of feeds in. And I think that's something which you have to kind of own your feed. If you see something wrong, report it. If you see something that is not right, again, report it, but then also find content that is of authoritative sources. Yeah, but this is it's a very raw space right now, and I think the world is also looking at ways in which to make sure how do you secure an online space and online norms. This is very fluid. For us right here and for faith leaders, what we can do is to, a very simple thing, but very important thing, is to, if you think about it, inject more positive content into that space. Yeah, and creating that content will help. Yeah.
Thank you, MS Alvin. We have one question from online, but I want to give a priority to the people who already took the effort coming here, whether by driving or walking or by the train. So can we have a next question or comment from the floor? Okay, we'll go by Ashraf first and followed by Sarabjit.
Hi, sorry. So the biggest issue in light of the COVID-19 is job insecurity. And because of all of the other insecurity, people are emotionally, the emotion are heightened.
Sorry, Ashraf, can you introduce yourself?
Sorry, I'm Ashraf. I'm actually one of the docents of Harmony Center, but I'm also representing the ILO Youth Committee. So a lot of discussions say that because of this COVID-19, it put a reset button economically in all aspects. But the interfaith status of Singapore have been proven to be COVID-proof in comparison with other few states. What do you see the future of interfaith in us? Putting a reset button, we've done good enough, it's a work in progress, but what do you see the next level of interfaith in Singapore? Yeah. And you were talking about the algorithm. Of course, I was inspired by this Netflix series. The more you Google Liverpool, the more Liverpool pictures keep on appear in your Facebook feed. But there's a serious issue. I think you have heard about the Conan, is it? The QAnon. It's the far right conspiracy. Conspiracy theory becomes so powerful into a movement. And that is what we fear. And people are globalized, people are influenced by what's happening. I think Minister Shanmugam have unfortunately mentioned about the 37 individuals. How do we prevent such horrific incident from happening in Singapore? So 2 questions, the future of interfaith. Second, how do we prevent such conspiracy theory from being a movement in Singapore? Thank you.
Rasha, thank you for that question. I suspect that for the first question, folks like yourself play a huge role. And I think generation after generation, we have to take it upon ourselves to set the tone to see, okay, what kind of Singapore do we want? And I think those that came before us have really set that tone. But we need to continue. So Young IRO, Young Sikh Association, etc. The youth groups of mosques, the youth groups of churches, temples, all of that. You have to set the tone. And again, some things you think is very modern or forward-looking, but then you just go back 71 years to Maulana Abdul Alim Siddiqui, and then that truths remain gold now, right? And he said it in that same lecture, and that's why we are here today, that the leaders of faith must teach their followers, I'm paraphrasing, to learn about other faiths. And then to also use the same kind of moral standards across faith to overcome the evils, social evils. So if you think about it, you go back 71 years at that fateful day, you can apply what he had said to today. Because if you think about it, the social ills of today are exactly what you mentioned. But the more we look back upon history and learn from visionaries then, like Abdul Alim Siddiq, I think we are in the right course. And I think that's a lot. It also answers your second question as well. Because the more that we learn about interfaith, the more then we put those offline learnings online, I think it will overcome this. But that doesn't mean that conspiracy theories and all that, like QAnon, it was a very big issue in the US, but then the US polity was also very polarized. That's the issue. And if you look, when they're asked to, what is your issue? What is your view about QAnon? I think I think the President of the United States said he did not say anything about it. So our polity and our political space has to put as its guiding principles these kind of truths that we hold dear, that Abdul Alim Siddiq had set, that also our founding fathers have set. But if leaders, religious leaders, faith leaders, political leaders, don't set the tone, then I think society also will go down that route. Yeah.
Sorry, Sarabjit, can I know if you have a question or a comment? Okay, we'll just take the last question. Yeah, thank you.
Hi, Moes. Hi, Liana. Thanks for. It's always a pleasure to listen and learn from both of you. Very quick question, actually. So, due to COVID, many organizations such as the Young Sikh Association as well, we've had to change the format of a lot of our platforms and initiatives, and necessarily they've had to go online. But interestingly, we've realized that it's actually been good for us because we've had a lot more participation online. And we figured when we asked some of the younger people who did join us, and maybe not so in the past, why was it, what made them switch? What was that deciding factor? And they shared with us that it was actually the fact that online they felt safer to participate. And this is something that I also felt when Harmony Center invited me for the HA TikToks, and I felt it was a really nice safe space they had created for me to share, but also respond to questions by participants. My question then is, if we are hopeful, and presumably we will be going back to what was pre-COVID, where we will be having physical events such as this, how do we effectively create some of those conditions where people still feel safe and they are encouraged to participate in sessions like these? Because we would, of course, you also alluded to the fact that the physical still will be important, it will be relevant to have these kinds of discussions, and that format is something that we can't completely give up. So just curious to hear your thoughts on how can we create those safe conditions for people to have these sometimes tough, perhaps uncomfortable conversations as well.
Well, Sarabjit, you had those tough conversations. So actually, if you want, you can ask Sarabjit. But those are really, really good examples where you have led that way. But I think also what is quite interesting now is on the online space and offline space. For example, we have this event next week called Switch and the Singapore Finance FinTech Festival. And the team showed me the figures and the enrollment. There's actually much more than if they were all physical, which means that people who ordinarily would come physically, they can't obviously because of the pandemic. They are also coming in, I think it was 2 to 3 times more, the enrollment. And because you make it also easier, the barriers of entry to go and listen to a sermon, for example, on Muslim.sg or a church sermon or even on Qingming, right? You make it a little bit lower, then I think you have more people coming in as well. I suspect that when, in some time where there's physical interaction, those that cannot come for some reasons or not, they can also dial online. So I'm guessing that a hybrid model may eventually be a bit of the norm. So for example, if you are running a sermon or something, then you will also have people dialing in at the same time, which is exactly what we're doing right now. We're on YouTube and we're also physical. That's hybrid because we have a maximum of 50 here, but then we have a maximum of almost infinity, or however many the platforms allow. Yeah. So this is maybe a prelude or a preview of things to come in when we go into a post-COVID world, hopefully. Yeah.
Thank you so much, MOS Alvin Tan. We are running 6 minutes behind time. But thank you so much for your inputs, and also thank you for your questions and reflections. For those who still have questions and some comments, some burning comments, not to worry, you can always approach us, Harmony Center. We'll still take back those questions and see if we can address it in a different platform, in a different discussion. But I certainly believe that this is not the end of the issues that we are discussing. In fact, it should be a continuous effort as we reflect and find ways in strengthening our inter-religious, interfaith understanding, as well as appreciating further our social harmony, especially in this pandemic. And I think what we can be hopeful is trying to find more opportunities where we can exchange resources, exchange ideas across all faith communities, and work together and survive in these critical times. So thank you once again, MOS Alvin Tan. And now I'll pass the mic back to Ashraf and the MC. Thank you.
Thank you, MOS Alvin Tan. And Ustazah Liana, we request if you could stay in front. Fortunately or unfortunately, the slogan, "You'll never walk alone," is even more pertinent in these times. So you can guess which team I support. Okay. Now let us proceed with the third segment of today's event, where we would like to present our tokens of appreciation to the contributors and the presenters of Harmony Centre's online initiatives, Singapore Reads and HA TikTok series. First, Singapore Reads is a new series introduced by Harmony Centre on the 18th of September 2020 to bring young people of different faiths together to discuss thematic issues through their faith values and the books they read. The objective of this series is to encourage young generations to appreciate interfaith conversations and develop critical minds through reading. For the inaugural series, the Centre ran 5 episodes under the chosen theme of nation building. It was a collaborative effort between Harmony Centre's representatives and members of the inter-religious organization, IRO Youth. You may refer to the screen to see the representatives from both organizations. Due to the current circumstances, Mr. Shukul Raj from IRO Youth will be collecting the tokens of appreciation on behalf of the Singapore Reads team. And at the same time, we invite all of the Singapore Reads team for a group photo with our guest of honor. So now, may I once again invite MOS Alvin Tan, our CE, Mr. Isa Masood, and the Mufti of Singapore, Dr. Naziruddin Muhammad Nasir, to present the tokens of appreciation. Now I would like to call upon Mr. Shukul Raj to represent the Singapore Reads team and along with all the other presenters. Please. A warm round of applause, please. Shukul Raj is here. Okay, please do ensure you are socially distanced. The rest can go behind and follow the cue of our photographer, please. Ya, ke kanan lurus. Thank you. A warm round of applause, please. Now, may I request Minister and Mufti to stay? CE, sir, you may return to your seat, please. Next up is the presentation of the tokens of appreciation to the speakers and discussants of our TikTok series. The HA TikTok series is a new conversational series launched online by Harmony Centre on the 30th of September 2020. It is a program to gather representatives and experts to discuss contemporary issues that tick them. The inaugural theme was navigating safe space, strengthening faith and family ties in COVID-19. And with 9 out of the 10 religions under the IRO that were involved in this series. All of our episodes are available on Harmony Centre's YouTube channel. Our panelists and discussants include academicians, faith leaders, and subject matter experts. Again, you may refer to the screen to see who the presenters were. Now again, due to the current circumstances, Dr. Matthew Matthews will be collecting the tokens of appreciation on behalf of the TikTok's representatives, followed by a group photo with all of the TikTok representatives. To present the tokens of appreciation, I would graciously like to invite President of MUIS, Haji Muhammad Alami Musa, to accompany Minister Alvin Tan and Mufti of Singapore, Dr. Naziruddin. Now may I call upon Dr. Matthew Matthews to receive the tokens of appreciation along with all the other members and discussants of our TikToks. Please, Doctor. Bishop, so you may have that staggered formation just like Singapore Reads. The new norm of photo taking.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you, MOS Elvin Tan, President Haji Alami Musa, and Mufti Dr. Naziruddin. You may return to your seats, please. We'd like to thank the participants of both our online initiatives for your relentless support and your deep insights. Ladies and gentlemen, now let us capture this precious moment by taking a socially distanced group photo together. So we'll take cue from our photographer. So the first photo, we will be seated, and then the photographer will request that we stand for the next one. So we'll take the cue from our photographer. Photographer, please. Thank you, sir. Thank you, everyone. That brought back some small memories of my master parade during my NS days. Thank you so much, ladies and gentlemen. Harmony Center would like to sincerely thank everyone from the bottom of our hearts for taking time out to be with us here today. We hope you have gained as much insights as we did. Now, our Minister of State, guest of honor, Minister of State Alvin Tan will be taking his leave. Thank you, Minister, sir, for being here with us today, and we wish you all the best. He will be accompanied by the senior management of MOS, please. A warm round of applause for our guest of honor. Thank you. We see each other again soon. Of our guests, please remain seated as our guest of honor takes his leave. For the rest of our audience, we have not left you shortchanged. We have prepared some small makan for you, which have been packed into bento boxes. Kindly refer to the stickers that have been given to you. They denote the seat number, which you will use to identify your table numbers where your bento sets have been placed. For those who like to use the washroom, it is situated to the right of this auditorium. There are signages to guide you as well. Please do approach any of the Harmony Center team members or ushers should you face any difficulties. We hope you've had a wonderful afternoon with us, and we pray that the situation will further improve and that we will be able to meet and mingle like how we used to. Nonetheless, do stay safe and healthy always. I'm Ashraf, your MC, signing out. Thank you. For Raj and Dr. Matthews, you may distribute to the members later. Sure, sir.